Did you know that nearly 75% of physicians do not know the cost of common tests, treatments, or procedures in their specialty? Welcome back to the channel, everybody. For those of you who are new around here, my name is Michael, aka Dr. Cellini, and I'm a board-certified diagnostic and interventional radiologist in New Jersey. So yes, it is true, 75% of physicians don't know the cost of common tests, treatments, or procedures in their specialty, according to a recent Doximity poll, which I'll link down below. Now, I think it's safe to say that the reason behind this is multifactorial, but to be honest, most physicians have kind of been left in the dark when it comes to costs and prices of what they prescribe, which in turn negatively affects patients and also physicians because they are unable to give proper guidance on how to save the patient money. So let's go ahead and get into this video. We're going to be talking about why physicians don't know the cost of things that they actually prescribe, and then we'll talk about what we can do to fix it. Let's go. How about these red scrubs, by the way? It's Master Sunday, so you know, I'm wearing red. So before I get started, a lot of the information comes from an article which I will link down below. It is entitled 72% of doctors don't know the cost of common treatments, which of course I will link down below. So why are physicians so clueless when it comes to healthcare costs? Well, for starters, we don't actually set the prices for insurance companies or Medicare or Medicaid. So we actually have no idea the cost of things. And it's almost like the system was designed that way. But it really is odd when you actually think about it. In literally any other market, the buyer and the seller controls the price. A seller sets the cost of goods or services to a buyer, and then the buyer decides if they want to buy it or not. And that price will fluctuate based on one of the most rudimentary principles in economics, supply and demand. Now, this model isn't completely clueless to other medical services because dentists and optometrists offer these kind of services. However, patients in the US healthcare system are not aware of these upfront costs. And furthermore, the prescribing physician can't even give an estimate for these costs because it varies so much between person to person. I think almost my entire life, I would make an appointment, go to the appointment, and have no idea what the actual cost of that appointment was until either after the appointment was over or when I get a bill in the mail a couple days later or weeks later. Or as one physician so eloquently put in the article, the cost of everything down to the hospital bed sheets is known, but for whatever reason, it's not made available to the physician or the patient. And those words have never been truer. And then they went on to say, it's like walking into the grocery store without price tags, except the end result is a very big price tag. That is exactly right, and I couldn't have said it better myself. Imagine just going shopping. It looks like everything's free, but in the back of your mind, you know it's gonna cost something, but you don't really have an idea. But then you get to the register and you get bombarded with this massive costs because they can essentially charge whatever they want. That is the US healthcare system. Okay, so let's get back to that poll I spoke about at the beginning of this video. 2,489 physicians responded to that poll. The results of that poll showed that 72% of physicians are somewhat or very uncertain about the cost of tests they prescribe and also treatments and procedures that they prescribe. And a very small percentage of those physicians polled actually had some knowledge of common medical costs or somewhat certain of those medical costs. Let's break it down a little further. The specialties with the greatest price uncertainty are the following: neurology, general surgery, anesthesiology. Those three specialties reach the top of uncertainty of medical costs at about 80%, which means 80% of the physicians in those fields were uncertain of normal costs of procedures, tests, and treatments that were regularly prescribed. Pediatricians and pediatric subspecialists were also at the top of uncertainty at 79 and 78% respectively. In the field most knowledgeable about prices, well, that's ophthalmology, which was the only specialty in this study with the majority confident about medical pricing. So their uncertainty of medical costs was at 46%, or said another way, they were 54% confident about medical costs. The article stated that this may be because they work closely with optometrists. Okay, so what about the primary care physicians? You know, the ones on the front lines who are prescribing almost all of this stuff out there. Well, 74% were unsure of medical costs on the stuff they were actually prescribing. And we can just look at this chart right here, the primary care chart, percent of physicians uncertain of common medical costs in their specialty. Pediatrics, who were 79% uncertain, followed by internal medicine, med peds, family medicine, and surprisingly, geriatrics were 59% uncertain about their costs they were prescribing, which is below the average of 74%. So why do primary care physicians, the ones who are prescribing the most of this stuff, know so little about pricing? Well, it may be in part due to the broad nature of their work. In the same day, they may order labs on one patient, followed by a CT guided biopsy, followed by an MRI of the pelvis with contrast, followed by blood pressure medication, and ending the day by ordering a cerebral angiogram. So when you're prescribing stuff this broad, there really is no way to keep up with medical costs, unless somehow, some way there was AI software or a giant chart that kind of made it easier for you. Furthermore, after all of the demands placed on primary care physicians as it is, having to see many patients as fast as humanly possible, should we really be tacking on a conversation about costs to those already lengthy visits, which is not only uncomfortable for the patient and the doctor, but it also takes a lot of something they don't have: time. I have many friends in the primary care fields, and they will all say they do not have enough time with patients because of the increased demands. So I don't think it would be prudent if we tack on a little extra time to each visit to go over costs. I just don't see it feasible. All right, so enough about primary care physicians. Let's talk about specialists. So let's take a look at this specialist graph. So we have the average percent of physician specialists who are uncertain with common medical costs in their specialty at 71%. Like we mentioned earlier, neurologists are the most uncertain when it comes to common medical costs, and dermatology actually is the least uncertain out of the group when it comes to medical costs. That may be because they have kind of a narrow scope of practice and they prescribe, I don't know, I'm not going to I was gonna say that they only prescribe steroids and antifungals, but I know my friends who are in dermatology are gonna yell at me, but that's just a joke. But they do have a smaller bag of things that they prescribe. Let's just put it that way. This is a broad generalization of dermatology. Don't come at me. Something else that this article mentioned was that there may be a correlation between knowledge of medical costs and physician age. So let's take a look at the age graph here. Percent of physicians uncertain of common medical costs by age. Younger doctors were the most uncertain about medical costs, or 83% under 29 years old, and 84% in my age group, the 30 to 39 year olds. So my age group is actually the most uncertain when it comes to medical costs. Sweet. But most of the uncertainty related to medical costs actually decreased with age. Only 60% of doctors in their 60s were uncertain of medical costs. And as you can imagine, the discrepancy is consistent with a physician's stage in practice as well. Uncertainty of medical costs was 90% for medical students, 85% for residents, and 90% for fellows. So fellows and medical students were the same, which makes the younger doctors quite a bit more unsure when it comes to medical costs compared to doctors later in their life or careers. Or in other words, 73% of doctors 5 to 10 years out of training, and only 62% with doctors more than 10 years out of training. So what about me? As a subspecialist interventional radiologist, do I know the costs of my procedures that I do on a daily basis? Well, not really. I do know some of the procedural codes for some of the more common procedures that I do, and I can give or take estimate on what I can be reimbursed for each particular code, but I actually have no idea the cost to the patient. And to be honest, I don't even know where I would find that data. And nobody's told me where to find that data if it is somewhere to be found. That's the weird part. I do a mixture of emergent and non-emergent procedures for inpatients that gets kind of lumped into their hospital stay. And I also have a nice mixture of outpatient procedures as well. And I really couldn't tell you how much any of them really cost the patient. Part of it is because I don't even know where to find the information, and also because it's so complicated. There are a lot of different fees that go into the cost to the patient, such as professional fee, technical fees, what kind of medical devices were used, and all that kind of stuff. I can't even ballpark it, to be quite honest, especially in regards to how each patient has a different insurance plan and they reimburse and cover each patient differently. So the real question here is, what are we doing to fix this? There have been some legislative efforts to help address the high and hidden costs of medical care. In fact, the CMS, or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, issued a rule on price transparency requiring hospitals to make prices of common services publicly available, starting January of 2021. And this is the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services website, cms.gov. Hospital price transparency legislation. Hospital price transparency helps Americans know the cost of hospital item or service before receiving it. Starting January of 2021, each hospital operating in the U.S. will be required to provide clear, accessible pricing information online about the items and services they provide in two ways. One, as a comprehensive machine-readable file with all items and services. Two, in a display of a shoppable services in a consumer-friendly format. This information will make it clear for consumers to shop and compare prices across hospitals and estimate the cost of care before going to the hospital. They also issued a rule for health plans and insurers to do the same, which became became effective January of 2022. But of course, enforcement has been delayed till July. Now, even though we have these new laws in place, hospitals and insurers haven't made too much progress. As of earlier this year, a report from the patientsrightsadvocate.org website evaluating 1,000 hospitals showed that only 14% were in compliance. And guess what? The CMS has not done anything about the non-compliance. No fines or anything like that. As of December 2021, CMS has issued 335 warning issues to hospitals they deemed non-compliant with its hospital rights transparency regulations. They didn't actually fine anybody in 2021, but allegedly in 2022, they're going to up the ante. There's going to be an increase of the penalty for being non-compliant up to $5,500 per day in 2022. The best part about all of this is that even with the goal of trying to be more transparent with pricing, nothing has been done to help the actual physicians, the ones prescribing all of this stuff. There's been no tools or education to help these physicians in the push towards more price transparency. Again, which is odd because they are the ones prescribing everything. One Harvard internal medicine physician in this article put it the best: "When I'm seeing patients, it's hard to know the amount of money they would have to pay for the care I am recommending because I don't have a way to know the price of the service or medication, and I have no way of knowing what their insurance coverage requires." To combat this lack of clarity, some groups have made prices more accessible to patients and physicians. Some hospitals have even looked into hiring patient navigators to kind of navigate these patients through long, lengthy medical stays and help to ensure that they lower their healthcare costs. Other hospitals have even set up online cost estimators. There has been a decent effort to help with cost transparency, but those efforts are still in their beginning stages. More consistent work is required for this to become more commonplace. But for it to have any meaningful change, it needs to be modified for each and every individual patient and their insurance policy, which is the part that complicates all of this. Those damn insurance companies. Like I keep mentioning, we are heading in the right direction, but this is a very long road. And also, we don't even have enough data to ensure that cost transparency actually lowers costs. But we have to keep fighting the good fight to make sure that patients and physicians stay informed and that we can ultimately make the best and the most cost-effective treatment plan together. And that officially concludes this video. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. Link to everything will be below. Make sure you gently tap that subscribe button, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Instagram and TikTok if you don't already, and as always, I'll see you all on the next video. Bye.